We now know that Hunter Biden received money from Ukrainian energy companies. So let's hope that this conflict in Ukraine has no connection with energy, right? 5.1 million glorious awakening wonders are here right now. Here we are in limitless connection. Glory be. Glory to us, awakening together. Sure, there's complexity. Sure, there's complications. Sure, there's occasional doubt. But if we pursue truth, if we investigate, if we communicate honestly and authentically, there's a hope for us to build something new from this. Change is possible. I can tell you that right now. We're going to be talking about Hunter Biden and his involvement with Ukrainian energy companies. It's an interesting and fantastic story. If you want to see me live, you actually can. I'm performing in Scarborough and Sheffield. There's a few tickets left. It's an amazing live experience. Come see me in Bristol, Glasgow, Plymouth. I'm all over this beautiful country. Hopefully I'll get to go around the world one day soon. But for now, it's the UK. There's a link in the description if you want to come. Now, let's see how Hunter Biden turns over a dollar bill in this crazy old world. Now, of course, loads of you will say the Hunter Biden story has been around for ages. People were talking about it during the Trump-Biden election, but it was verboten, forbidden, prevented from being discussed because it was so important that Joe Biden became president. Phew! Now Joe Biden's president and everything's perfect in the world. Perhaps we can openly discuss what's going on with Hunter Biden, particularly as this is from the Guardian newspaper. And those of you that are not British, I'll tell you that the Guardian is a neoliberal, centre-left newspaper production. So if it's being discussed in the Guardian, is this yet another example of something that couldn't be discussed, something that got you labelled a nutter, a lunatic, a fascist and a racist, finally making its way into the mainstream. To the political right in America, Joe Biden's son Hunter has been the gift that keeps on giving, with his public struggles with addiction, scandalous private life and tangled business life. I would say the struggles with addiction and scandalous private life, those things are literally private. I personally am in recovery from addiction. I don't think anyone should be judged for what amounts to a mental illness. But the business dealings, if your father happens to be the President of the United States and a lifelong career politician, I think are significantly interesting. To the left, Hunter's travails are dismissed as a Republican political obsession and a talking point for tabloid journalism and internet gossip. These labels of left and right are becoming prohibitive to our mutual progress. The inability to openly discuss something based on a set of core principles and values that do not mutate according to a particular agenda has become a problem. It shouldn't matter if you historically affiliate with the Republican or Democrat Party. Who cares? Either there's been some corrupt business dealings or there hasn't. If there's been some corrupt business dealings, that's of interest to everyone. But last week, two witnesses called before a federal grand jury seated in Wilmington, Delaware, which is looking into the tax affairs of the president's son, made the subject harder to avoid. First, there was London Roberts, with whom Biden has a 3-year-old unacknowledged child. What's that noise over there? I'm hungry. I don't know. I need some alimony. Did you hear something? Is the window open? Then Zoe Keston, an ex-girlfriend and lingerie and textile designer, spent 5 hours giving testimony on Biden's spending, including, reportedly, stays at the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, where in 2018, allegedly, Biden was preoccupied with cooking crack cocaine. We have an obligation to extract the salacious and addiction-related aspect of this story from the financial and economic side, not just because it's my personal belief and experience that addiction is an illness, but also because if we conflate the addiction and the crack and the sex workers with the economic and financial, what we have is a sort of a low-level, tabloid, gossipy chit-chat thing, rather than a potentially important geopolitical corruption thing. I'm saying it suits them to see it all intermingled. Oh, it's crack, it's to do with sex workers. Crack and sex workers is an issue that can be discussed with a different set of principles and values, both involve mental health and humanitarianism, but the economics and finances, that's important and that's interesting. I'm not saying those things aren't important, I'm saying they're distinct and they're different, and this particular story warrants bespoke analysis. Donald Trump tried to make an issue out of Hunter's business dealings in Ukraine, Russia and China, which included high-paid consultancies and gifts and allegations that as Vice President, Joe Biden had shaped American foreign policy in Ukraine to benefit his son. We've already made a video that explains various ways in which American interests and American-sponsored agencies have shaped Ukrainian policy. We'll show you that in a minute. So to hear that Biden may have shaped Ukrainian policy in order to advance the interests of his son does not seem as unfeasible as it might first sound. Then came the surfacing of Hunter Biden's missing laptop with its library of decadent pictures and business email chains, mysteriously left at a Wilmington repair shop, which found its way to Republican political operatives including Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon, plus the right-wing press and the FBI. Again, it's a problem when matters of principle become partisan issues. Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, it's pretty clear where their interests lie, and right-wing press, that speaks for itself. But we shouldn't be so tribally loyal to a set of motifs and ideals that ultimately don't serve ordinary people one jot either way anyway, that we can't look at what's actually happening. Are these people behaving appropriately? Is there significant evidence for financial inquiry or economic corruption? If the answer is no, then it's like, oh, phew. But if this does lead to evidence of financial impropriety, then you have to incorporate that into your understanding of the Democratic movement and the Democratic Party and the way that this was handled during the election and the way that it wasn't published and what the ends were. How can you defeat corruption using corruption? You're now part of the problem. On the political flip side, House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff said the laptop was a smear from Russian intelligence, and 50 former intelligence officials said it was probably Russian disinformation. Now, however, almost no one disputes its authenticity. So just remember that. Remember what you saw on late night talk shows. Remember what you saw on the news. Remember how this was discussed. I know you remember, because I know you get called conspiracy theorists. You know there are things you and I see differently. Loads of things. But hopefully we can agree on a set of core principles and values that we can apply in almost any situation. That means we can start to build systems based on those values. If the values change on according to who's done what, oh no, that corruption's not corruption because we did it. Oh, that's no problem. Don't report that. That could change. Then we've got nothing. We've got nothing to defend. And when we find ourselves in serious geopolitical situations, conflict, war, who do we turn to? What resource in yourself have you got if you don't have no values? Because you know that your whole culture is built on the plasticity of personal requirement, self-interest, self-centeredness, things that in spiritual systems are regarded as sinful and to be avoided. Hunter Biden confirmed that he was under federal investigation over a tax matter in December 2020 after his father was elected president. Biden has not been charged with any crime, and David Weiss, US Attorney for Delaware, who oversees the inquiry, is regarded as a straight shooter, unlikely to be swayed by political pressure. He was appointed by Trump on the recommendation of the state's 2 Democratic senators and has not been replaced by Joe Biden. Weiss, according to Politico, avoided taking any decisions that would alert the public to the existence of the inquiry before the 2020 presidential election, and a repeat of the FBI's Hillary Clinton missing emails investigation, which may have influenced the outcome of the 2016 contest. So this is something people were aware of and investigating prior to the last American election, but did not report on or make any decisions that might lead to public interest in order to keep it out of the news, presumably because they thought it might discredit Joe Biden and his presidential campaign. So that is the management of information, or as it would be called now, misinformation. But the larger question, beyond whether Hunter Biden correctly met tax obligations during a period in which, by his own telling, he was being paid $50,000 a month by Ukrainian firm Burisma, which is a good wage, let's face it, 50 grand a month from Burisma. What do you get paid? About 50 grand a month? Who buy Burisma? What are they? Ukrainian energy company? What do you do? Keep that out. Are Biden's financial ties to foreign figures and businesses while his father served as Barack Obama's number 2? The thing with Joe Biden is Joe Biden's been in government for a long time. He's only been president for a little while and, blink and you'll miss it. But he's been in politics for a while. So during that whole time, the business activities of his family are of significant interest. In addition to Hunter Biden's ties to Ukraine through gas company Burisma, he has sat on the boards of BHR Partners, a private investment fund backed by a number of Chinese state entities. Oh my God. A hedge fund, Paradigm, a consultancy, Seneca Global Advisors, and the fundraising firm, Rosemont Seneca. Okay, so I suppose if you are the son of a prominent politician, it is beholden upon you to ensure that your business interests are pretty immaculate and ties to Chinese state-funded business interests, Ukrainian energy companies. These feel like potentially sensitive areas which ought be approached with a degree of circumspection. Republicans, including the senior Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, have called on the Justice Department to evaluate whether Hunter or Joe Biden's brother, James Biden, should have registered as foreign agents over their business arrangements with the Chinese government-backed energy company CEFC. With all this complexity in the world, with all these narratives built around national sovereignty and the competition between nations and the fears of a change in where ultimate global power rests, suggests to me, do they you, am I being naive, that if you are a politician, the amount of involvement you and your family have with, say, Chinese energy firms or Ukrainian energy firms is none. That's the amount, isn't it? Like, if you're in a position of public office, anyone in your family earn any money out of Chinese and Ukrainian energy? No, God, that would complicate things because, you know what I mean? I've got to be in here, in Congress, in the Senate, in American government. I thought, you know, maybe it might cloud my judgment if my kids are earning money out of Ukrainian, you know, because I love my kids and stuff. And who doesn't want to earn 50 grand a month from a Ukrainian energy firm? So what I've decided is, me and my family, we're just going to make our money out of politics, serving the people. You know, the stuff we say on telly. We're going to do that. In 2018, Business Insider reported that Hunter Biden sought an annual $2 million retainer to aid in the recovery of Libyan assets frozen by the Obama administration during Gaddafi's rule. Any accusation of nepotism is unwarranted when your job is unfreezing assets of the Libyan state that have been frozen by the president. You or I could have got that job, couldn't we? Could you unfreeze these assets? Yeah, let me just make a quick phone call. Yeah, all right, Barack. Could you unfreeze these Libyan assets? Yeah, absolutely. Dad says hey as well. Any one of us could do that job. I remember when my dad offered me a job unfreezing Libyan state assets. Or when me auntie Angie said, Russell, do you want to work for a Ukrainian energy company? You or me or any one of us could get these jobs. According to Jonathan Turley, a legal scholar at the George Washington University Law School, influence peddling is a virtual spectator sport in the nation's capital, a protected corruption. Yeah, that's what that sort of amounts to. This is not a criticism of Hunter Biden as a human being. I couldn't identify more strongly with his struggles around addiction. But when you're dealing with something like, you know, the complexities of the relationships between Ukraine, Russia, the United States of America, which have in this instance, unless I'm wildly incorrect, led to a war in which people are dying, you require transparency. And also more broadly and outside of the issue of this horrific conflict, you want to know that your elected officials are operating solely, uniquely and purely in the interests of the people they were elected to represent. If you do not have that, you do not have democracy. If you don't have democracy, you cannot make the claims that democracy allows you to make. We operate in the interest of the people. We are your servants. You can't use that piety. You can't use that sanctimony. You have to come out up front, sit down all nice and straight and say, we are corrupt. Both sides are corrupt. We operate on the level of corruption. We will do whatever we need to do to ensure our interests are met. And then we all know where we stand. Turley said it's how powerful ruling elites make much of their money, and Congress has never seriously tried to crack down on it. I wonder why. The children and spouses of powerful leaders, dependent child, continue to receive windfall payments from companies and foreign interests. But we've never quite seen the likes of Hunter Biden's enterprises. Wow. Even people who are legal scholars at George Washington University are astonished, almost impressed by the range of business interests. His contracts go beyond anything we've seen before. Joe Biden has long insisted that his son did nothing wrong. That's what I do with my kid. That's why you have to make sure that things are governed properly. There's nobody that's indicated there's a single solitary thing that he did that was inappropriate, wrong, or anything other than the appearance, Biden said 2 years ago. That all looks wrong, but actually, it isn't. Good night. End of broadcast. But should the Delaware panel recommend criminal charges, it could ricochet around the second half of his father's administration. So there you go. This is not a criticism of Hunter Biden as a human being. This is a critique of potentially nepotism, but I guess that's natural. It's natural above all else, I suppose. But in the case that it's led to potentially corrupt relationships, financial relationships, particularly when they interface with the complexity of our current global situation, I think it's worthy of examination. Not to mention the fact that this stuff was excluded from mainstream media during the build-up to the 2020 election. What do I say? I say that our politicians should have no secondary interests other than the interest that all human beings have. That we should change our systems so that no one's in a position to have those kind of economic financial partnerships during times of government or even after it. And what would you get then? Dedicated, devoted public servants that are leading communities because that's what they want to do, not because they think it might lead to financial opportunity down the line. We need a shift in consciousness as individuals and as a society. So when we have complex and sophisticated situations like the one we currently have, we know who we are, we know what we believe in, we know what this means, that we can focus on the important thing, Ukrainian suffering, because we know in our own governments, in our own politicians, we have integrity and authenticity. Is that too much to ask? Yes, at the moment it's an impossibility because the systems are not set up to provide it. But when we're aiming for changes, these are the kind of values and principles that we need to keep at the forefront of our consciousness. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments below. What do you think about this situation? Do you feel cheated? Do you feel swindled? Do you think that the issues shouldn't be conflated? The issues of his private life and his financial dealings? How do you feel about all of that stuff? What does this make you feel about Joe Biden? What does it make you feel about the last election? If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one or this one. Please come and see me. I'm live all over the country. It's a raw, beautiful live experience. Scarborough, Sheffield, still a few tickets left. Newcastle, Hull, Plymouth, Bristol, Glasgow. If you want to join my mailing list, click here and I'll tell you exactly what I'm up to and why. Most importantly of all though, please, for God's sake, stay free.